Thanks, Alistair, and good morning, everyone. I'm Claire. I'm the Product Communications Manager here at Esri UK, and I'm joined by Eve, who is GIS Consultant. And we are really looking forward to sharing this session on imagery in ArcGIS with you today. Today, we are using many different types of imagery in our imagery workflows, and this is because we have more sources for imagery and other remotely sensed data than ever before. From aircraft, drones, satellites, mobile mapping systems, and CCTV cameras, there's a growing number of sensors that we can leverage to collect imagery data. And what's really prominent for me is that we're seeing a stark rise in the popularity and application of drones in particular. They are more accessible, more affordable, more user-friendly than ever before. And with the advent of multispectral and thermal technologies, it's enabled us as GIS professionals access to capture data beyond the visible eye, providing invaluable insights for environmental monitoring, agriculture, and urban planning. And if you don't have access to a drone or your own imagery, we have a fantastic network of partners that we can work with to source imagery that works for you and your use cases. And you'll be able to find some of these partners here today. OK, so if we have some imagery data, what's in it for us as GIS professionals? Well, we could use it to understand the natural environment around us. Here, a pixel classification has been used to understand land cover in the Scottish Highlands, where the green, or bare soil, represents quite a large proportion of this area. We could use it for change detection. Here, I'm using NDVI for soil health, and the difference before and after a wildfire on the Saddleworth Muir in 2018, where the damage can be really visibly seen. Here, hillshade relief has been used to monitor coastal erosion, and this can be used to map these changes year on year. And we can use our GeoAI tools for object detection. This is Ensham, the small town that we just seen in the opening plenary this morning, and I used the building footprints pre-trained model from the Living Atlas to digitize these buildings for me, enabling me to use them in a further analysis. And finally, with video, we can use this for multi-object detection. Here, counting cars as they enter or leave a car park. So that's just a flavor of what insights we can uncover with imagery using GIS. And so what Eve and I would like to share with you today is how the ArcGIS system is well placed to integrate with all different types of imagery. It offers us a comprehensive imagery system. And that all starts with our data, whether that be your own data collected from a drone perhaps, or from the Living Atlas, or indeed one of our fantastic partners. Once we have that data, ArcGIS is our oyster from that point. So I'd like to step through just 3 examples of recent advancements in imagery for ArcGIS. Up first, reality mapping that Mark was talking about in the opening plenary earlier. And we can use this to perform reality mapping to create accurate site models, base maps, and other foundational content. Let's take a look together in ArcGIS Pro. The ArcGIS Pro Reality extension allows us to create high-fidelity 2D, 3D, and true ortho products from satellite, drone, and aerial imagery. The green squares represent the footprint of hundreds of overlapping images. The image in the bottom left shows just one of these images and the ground control point in the small blue cross. This is part of the ortho rectification process that removes distortion in our images so that they appear without lean and on the correct place on the ground. From these corrected overlapping images, we can create 2D and 3D products such as DSMs, meshes, and point clouds using the reality mapping tools. And to bring this to life, I'd like to show you an example of something we created using these tools. So this is the results of a 3D mesh for the city of Stuttgart. This mesh was created using ArcGIS Reality Pro extension with over 69,000 individual images collected by GeoPly and one of their airplanes. This data totals a whopping 40 terabytes of data, and it covers 1,100 square kilometers. I wanted to share this example with you today to demonstrate the power of ArcGIS Pro in managing and processing large volumes of data to create these detailed digital twin models on your desktop. moving through our examples, ArcGIS also allows us to conduct analysis, collect observations, and supports inspections, monitoring, and operational intelligence. So next, I'd like to show you some of the support for video. What we're seeing here is a full motion video on the right and our map on the left. The map shows us the location of the aircraft, and the square is following the view we're seeing from the video as it appears on the ground. We can use the tools to export the current frame to the map as a separate image, add annotations to follow a moving target, and much more. Using video in this way means we can leverage this intelligence to make better decisions using all the data that we have at our disposal. Today, I'm showing you these capabilities through ArcGIS Excalibur. That's a web app available in ArcGIS Enterprise from June with updated user types. This is one of the new capabilities available with the Creator license or above in Enterprise only. These capabilities are also supported with ArcGIS Pro and the Image Analyst extension for you to do this also on your desktop. And finally, spatial pattern detection. This can help us to understand the natural and built environment. And to demonstrate this, I'd like to take a brief look at GeoAI in ArcGIS. We've been adding pre-trained models to the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the world for a few years now, and our collection has grown from building footprints to over 60 use case applications, including the solar panel detection that we've seen earlier this morning. The Segment Anything model, developed by Meta and released last year, does what it says on the tin. It segments everything that you can see in your imagery. You'll notice that the metadata for this model has a great description and a guide on how to use it. And you'll find all of this on all our pre-trained models, and I recommend that you check the requirements and recommendations here before you get started with any model for yourself. These models can be used across the whole ArcGIS system in ArcGIS Pro, Online, and Enterprise. So they're ready for you to use today wherever you're working. Let's take a look at the results of this model. So this is the results of the Segment Anything model on some high-resolution imagery. This imagery is from our partners at Blue Sky, and we can see that it's created a lot of individual features, including road markings and also these individual trucks. If I take a look more closely at the buildings, it's also identified the individual components of roofs on these buildings. A traditional footprint model would just give us one feature, so this could be quite useful for a solar potential assessment if it wasn't surrounded by all of the noise of the other features. If I use the deep learning tools together with a text SAM model instead, see if we can isolate this layer from the noise. This model allows me to provide a text prompt to allow the model to know what I'm looking for. I'll use building roof for this text prompt. And once it's run, we'll be able to see that the resulting layer has extracted the building roofs in yellow. And in this data, we can see that the individual roof components and their orientation have been isolated from the building footprint itself to help us inform better accurate assessment of each sloping component of these roofs. The addition of these SAM models opens up many more opportunities for us to use the pre-trained models that we might never need to train our own models ever again. But you know what they say never, and luckily ArcGIS Pro has tools available for us to help us train our own models if we need to. So those are just some advancements of the recent advancements that ArcGIS has to offer imagery, whether that be on the desktop, enterprise, or our software as a service solution, ArcGIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Online, you get to choose. I'd like to now hand you over to Eve, who will share with us what's possible with data available in the ArcGIS Living Atlas and ArcGIS Image for ArcGIS Online. Eve, over to you.
Thank you very much, Claire. There you go. So, as we've just seen, imagery is integrated throughout the ArcGIS system, whether it's in Pro or Enterprise. But I want to take a look at the capabilities available in ArcGIS Online, especially with the new user types, which are expected for June, which will expand many customers' access to imagery. So this is my content, where it's easy to add vector and imagery data in this simple drag and drop interface. But for this demo, I want to be showing how we can derive outputs solely from content within the Living Atlas. So we're not going to need to process any imagery ourselves. Instead, we can just jump right in. In the opening plenary, Balkas showed how imagery can lend itself to solar potential in Incham. And I wanted to expand on this. How can imagery support other smart infrastructure workflows? In this case, how it could help town planners mitigate for the urban heat island effect. Now, this is when urban areas heat at a faster rate than their surroundings due to buildings and other infrastructure absorbing and re-emitting heat. So, with layers from the Living Atlas, along with raster analysis tools, we are going to be creating a few key outputs for factors related to the urban heat island effect. At the same time, I'm going to show you how we're going to make this workflow customizable, and perhaps the best part for anyone who hates manually rerunning tools, replicable. So, let's start by looking at average surface temperature for the greater West Oxfordshire area, which is where Incham lies. And to do this, we can grab some multispectral Landsat data from the Living Atlas. It does require you to spell it properly, though. Still going. There we go. So, once you've made sure that you can spell properly and you add it to your map, we now have our first data set. But this is a global data set which spans from the 1970s until now. And so what I've done is gone for a closer inspection of multispectral Landsat data from last summer with minimal cloud coverage. And how was I able to do that, you might ask? Using the Image Collection Explorer. So this is a tool which allows you to access publicly available input imagery and have it available to learn more about. So in this case, you can drill into things like the metadata, or you can take attributes and sort them by areas of best interest, things like acquisition date or cloud cover. And then once you've found the imagery to best support your workflow, that's when you can add these individual layers to your map. You can save them to your organization for later, and then those can be used in raster editing and raster analysis. So now that we have our multispectral data, I want to be able to visualize this, and we can do so using processing templates. Now, processing templates act like a filter over your data, allowing you to quickly see things on the fly with no additional cost. In this case, it's also important because it allows you to visualize aspects of imagery that you otherwise wouldn't be able to perceive with the naked eye. Things like color infrared, shortwave infrared, or in our case, we're going to be using it for band 10 surface temperature in Celsius. And now we can dip into our analysis tools, starting by clipping the data to our area of interest. Thankfully, this is a shorter word to spell. So once we have it clipped to our area of interest, we want to do that to make sure that viewers aren't distracted by temperatures irrelevant to them. And one thing to keep in mind to be a bit more economical and efficient is customizing your environment settings, something like focusing the processing extent to your display or your layer, as well as being able to estimate the credits. Now, for the sake of time, I've run this ahead. But for an area of this size, it typically takes about a few minutes to run. And when it does, you're left with something that is clipped. And I've also re-symbolized this using a more intuitive color scheme so that we can see where the warmer and cooler areas from last summer lied within West Oxfordshire. Now, another element of urban heat islands is vegetation. Ideally, we'd like to be able to identify high-risk areas, and a part of that would mean looking at where there's tree canopy, meaning adequate shade, or where that's lacking. And to do so, we can extract that data using Sentinel-2 land use or land cover data, which is another layer from the Living Atlas, using European Space Agency imagery as well as a deep learning model to provide a global map of land cover. We can select this layer and dip into another one of our raster functions, the remap raster function, which allows us to identify the pixels of interest, in this case tree pixels, and ascribe everything else a value of 0, which effectively masks it out. And when we run this, it's really good about picking out those tree pixels, the green bits, and ignoring everything else. I want to tidy up this output, though, making sure to clip it, but then re-symbolizing it to give it a bit more of an intuitive color scheme. And when we do so, we're left with our tree pixels. But I think that we can drill a bit more out of this data, like looking at the % canopy cover for any of these given wards. And this is when we can jump into our geoprocessing tools and lean into the zonal statistics as a table, which is a powerful tool to be able to integrate your raster data with other data that you have. So in this case, being able to connect it to wards. Now, when you've done this, you'll be able to have it return a table with a summary counting all of the different tree pixels in each of the wards, which it's done, which I've used to derive the % tree cover per ward. If we join this to our wards layer and then duplicate it, we can re-symbolize this in order to better visualize the layer. In this case, doing so with a specific attribute, which is where we can pick the % tree cover. We can give it a bit of a jazzier color scheme, something more similar to the vegetation it represents. And there we have it. We now have 3 outputs related to surface temperature as well as tree canopy cover. But there's one final area of urban heat islands that I'd like to explore, and that is for built-up areas. So typically, the more impervious surfaces and built-up areas there are, the more heat is going to be trapped. And we could use the Sentinel-2 land cover data to pick out these red bits, the built-up areas. And we could do so using a really similar process that you just saw me do for the vegetation, with remapping and clipping and symbolization. But you have just seen me do this, and I think it would be a useful opportunity to show how we can make this even more efficient. And this is when raster function templates come into play, which you can find within the analysis section of your tab. Now, the raster function editor is a visual programming language which allows you to chain raster functions together. In doing so, it means that you can quickly process pixels without having to individually manage functions at each step along the way. And when you're happy with your template, you can open it to run, and all of your parameters are already in place, making for an efficient custom tool. As an added bonus, this only took about 10 minutes to run, so it was the perfect amount of time for me to brew a cup of coffee and deliberate over which biscuits you pair it with. And when this is done, you're also able to share these raster templates, making it a great tool to be able to share with others in your organization for them to replicate or modify your workflow. And that is our 4th and final output complete. So, with 2 layers from the Living Atlas, as well as a handful of analysis tools, we have managed to create 4 outputs related to the urban heat island effect. And I might be slightly biased, but this is pretty incredible. And these are just a few of the capabilities that are available to you with imagery in ArcGIS Online. So to talk a little bit more about this and to close us out, I will pass it back to Claire. Thank you.
Thanks, Eve. Today we've covered the recent advancements in the imagery space, covering all 3 themes: reality mapping, analysis and observation, and spatial pattern detection. And we did this across the whole ArcGIS system. From June, with the new user types, expanded access to our capabilities will give all users who are creator or above access to ArcGIS Pro. For ArcGIS Online, users will have access to ArcGIS Image for ArcGIS Online, once an extension and now just included. And for our enterprise users, you'll also get expanded access with ArcGIS Excalibur. Eve and I will be around on the presenter stand on floor 2 at the next break. Please do come and say hello. We'd love to hear your applications of imagery and answer any questions that you may have. And if you're joining us today on the live stream, please reach out to us on LinkedIn if you have any questions. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.